So here we are at the beginning of 2017. Thank you very much for joining me here to talk about some of the planning issues that we're going to be facing over the course of this year. Mike, I'll start with you. Perhaps you can tell us about what some of the biggest challenges you think the planning and construction industry are likely to face in 2017.
Well, I don't think planning will be at the top of that list. I think what's at the top of that list is materials and skills, some really basic stuff like that. There's a massive shortage of bricks and other materials, and trying to get bricklayers, electricians, plumbers is proving nigh on impossible. And obviously you've got the Brexit scare, whatever that will mean, whether it's Brexit means Brexit or Brexit is red, white and blue, whatever that means. But again, that's going to impact on that market because currently it's characterised by a lot of migrant workers, as it always has done. And I think the other thing for me is that in order to tackle the sort of housing crisis going forward, you have to tackle it on every single level. And I think the one that's sort of somewhat undercooked is the private rented sector, but at scale, institutionally backed. There seems to be signs of that coming forward. But if we want to really up housing numbers, particularly in areas like London, where buying your own home, no matter what the government does, is still going to be virtually impossible. That large-scale private rented sector, which you do see in other cities, in Northern Europe and North America, being the normal way of people accessing good quality housing that's reasonably priced.
Okay, Jamie, are these the issues?
There are some of the issues. There's lots of issues. Whether, as Mike says, planning is number one on the agenda now, I'm not entirely sure. I think the biggest challenge for planning itself is meeting government expectations. We have a whole raft of planning reforms again, which are in to some extent under the Housing and Planning Act. We still await regulations for the vast majority of the detail. For the more controversial elements, starter homes being the obvious one. So the planning system is about to be put in the spotlight again, with the main aim, according to government, to deliver more housing. So planning is almost becoming, or housing is becoming, a subset of planning, which is quite an interesting concept. There's planning and there's housing planning. And the challenge, I think, for the system is how it responds to those changes that are coming in. We have a lot of uncertainty. We have the future of SIL hanging in the balance as it stands. We don't know what the outcome of the SIL review is yet. We have starter homes. Again, we're waiting for regulations on those. We don't know the impact that they will have. We were talking to a major national house builder yesterday about starter homes, and they have a dedicated team to understanding exactly what that's likely to mean for their business model, and having to respond to that. It's causing quite a bit of unrest and uncertainty in industry. We also have the local plans expert group and their recommendations, seeing how far those will actually be taken forward, seeing whether the Secretary of State will genuinely intervene in local plan making where there aren't up-to-date plans. Again, we don't know how strong he's likely to be on those. So there are lots and lots of issues, a whole raft, which we're waiting for, and we are told the housing white paper will be arriving at some stage. It seems to be answering every question on our lips at the moment. Remains to be seen whether it actually does answer those questions.
Okay, so skills and materials, an issue, planning reforms ahead, the housing planning relationship. Alice, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the same. From a local government perspective, it is putting into practice the government reforms when we know the detail, and there's going to be a lot of detail, we hope, coming forward very soon. And going back to the skills issue, it's not just the construction industry. Recruiting experienced planners is a real challenge. At the authority where I work, it's a very competitive market. There aren't enough of them. I wish there were more, but that's a challenge for us to help run the planning service. Lots of local authorities as well are needing to look at their local plan, because the ones who got on and did it early, around the time of the NPPF, perhaps just a bit before, it's time to update those. So that's a big draw on capacity and resources as well. So that's another challenge, which won't be just for next year, but the following year as well. And on a more sort of strategic level, I think exactly the point about the private rented sector, but I think looking at all sorts of new models of housing and ways of delivering it, because of the way people live. Read in the paper the other day about, I won't use the word commune, but it was a collective, effectively, of housing for elderly single women, actually, living. There were 20 of them, all with their own properties, but living together in a new model. I think we've got to look at other things for the younger generation as well, about how the way they live their lives now and what's affordable for them, not just private rented sector, but all sorts of different models. I think it needs to be on the agenda.
Okay, so we're expecting quite a long white paper.
Yes.
So perhaps just sticking with this issue of housing, you've talked about some of the issues around the way people are living, but something that's almost certainly going to still be sort of at the top of the agenda is increasing housing delivery. That's not going to go away. Where are we going with pushing up housing delivery? What's some of the issues there?
Well, again, waiting to see what comes out of the government, but expectation is that, yes, there might be more pressure on to raise numbers, allocate more sites, and possibly a delivery test as well, which is a stick to use against local authorities where within their area there aren't enough houses being built, which is going to be interesting. I think it's quite it's a blunt tool to use nationally. I mean, I will fully accept that there are some local authorities who probably could allocate more land for housing, but it's politically difficult. It might be environmentally difficult as well. It involves all these hard choices. But there are other places that really have worked as hard as they can, have left no stone unturned to find the land, and I'm not sure what else they can do. I mean, in some places in the southeast, I know there's a lot of pressure. It was where people want to live, but really, where is it going to go? Where is it going to go without having serious impacts on the quality of the environment? It does involve some hard choices, and I think everybody's inching towards accepting that, but it's another matter about actually getting those choices and decisions made.
Sure. Mike, where's it going to go?
Well, I think the big challenge there is twofold. I think one is the way the government through the NPPF deals with sort of housing numbers and whether you're delivering or not, and their approach is to annualise your target, and that target would be 15 or 20 years, and it's a straight line generally. That's not how the world works, and a lot of authorities whose plan to deal with housing numbers in their area may be a development like a new town, an urban extension, that will be low numbers and then very high numbers, and they actually get penalised in that early stage because of the way the NPPF is written, and it's planning by Section 78 appeal. So there's quite a disincentive there to deal with those very difficult and challenging housing delivery projects at the same time that you're getting penalised because that's your approach and that's what your area lends itself to. So POS put on a conference on behalf of DCLG early this week to talk about strategic planning, and I think it's the first time with the new government and the new minister that's on the agenda and it's recognised. It was a dirty word with the previous administration with the abolition of the regional spatial strategies, but there does seem to be a clear recognition that you do need to have a strategy within your plan, and that strategy needs to deal with a whole range of issues, but the principal one often is housing delivery and how you're actually going to deliver it, and then the rest of the process needs to support that, and so we need to look at the rest of the process and perhaps parts of the NPPF so that those authorities whose solution genuinely is that long-term new town, garden village, whatever it is, model is supported and are able to do that, so that housing can get delivered in whatever form is right for that particular area.
Garden villages, that's certainly something that we've seen come up as an announcement of a new thing on the horizon. Jamie, I'm looking at you. How do we avoid some of the mistakes of the past with that kind of model?
Well, as you say, a new thing but not a new thing. We are kind of revisiting old ideas, but I think the idea this time is to make it work better than it was previously. We're doing some interesting work with North Essex and led by Colchester on 3 new garden community sites which are being promoted, possibly delivering up to 24,000 homes. And actually being involved in that process is quite enlightening, because you do get to see how much planning in the non-technical planning sense is required to actually bring people together to deal with difficult issues like land value capture and taking a sensible approach to that, but also making sure the authorities work together properly, because some of the proposed sites are across borough boundaries, so it's ensuring that the right delivery vehicle is created to deal with those, to ensure that they are properly planned, to ensure there's some control, and also ensure that there's some stakeholder retention for assets, so it's not simply plonking 50,000 new homes in the middle of nowhere and leaving it at that and calling it a garden community. It means a lot more than that, and if you track back to the Garden City principles, that should be the framework for any new garden city.
I'm seeing you nodding, Alice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is placemaking. It's not just about the numbers. And so, it is about thinking how places work. It's about getting infrastructure in place early on. It's about working with the future residents and also those around it. And I think using the basic Town and Country Planning Association principles, that the TCPA have done a lot of good work with some existing authorities called the New Communities Group, who are developing very big urban extensions or garden towns or cities. And it's integrating a lot of community engagement, a lot of thinking about how places actually work, integrating health aspirations, looking at the land value capture, the things that Jamie has just mentioned, which go back to those first principles. So it'll be hard, but it's certainly been done successfully before in some places, and we need to do so again.
Mike?
Yeah, and I think the point that you're going to do it better this time is interesting, in that the first time it was done was probably when it was done best.
Yes.
Yeah, and the reason for that was that they held on to the assets,
Yes.
and they are true placemakers, and those areas, those estates, and you see them in London, the estates where the assets are still held on to, they are real places that people invest in, and they're very, very successful. The later stages of the new towns development, the government were forced in most cases for those assets to be sold off, and by and large those areas have suffered as a result. So let's go back to the origins and copy that a bit more, and actually we might do nearly as good as they did.
So some lessons from the past there as well. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It looks like we're going to have a quite busy year ahead. And thank you for joining us. In a future episode, we'll be looking at one of the issues we touched on today, which was around resourcing, getting the right staff in teams, in councils to deliver. Thank you.